Going to welcome in Rupert Read, who is from the campaign group. While he's taking his seat, we'll show you some of the pictures from some of the demonstrations and people in various parts of London. They're on their way at the moment, I think, to Parliament Square. But Nadhim, whether you oppose or support these protests, you have to agree that it has moved the issue right up the political agenda. I mean, here they are in the Natural History Museum. We just saw pictures there. Do you agree?
Well, it certainly has taken up the interest of the media and has cut through, as I would have put it when I was
So it's worked, hasn't it?
Well, I don't believe it's the right thing to do, though. I think the right thing to do, by the way, which also cuts through, is what David Attenborough has been doing. And I think we cannot be complacent about this. Yes, we've cut down emissions by 23% since 2010. 42% since 1990, whilst the economy has doubled in size. You know, we're doing it a lot here, including the target that by 2050 we will reduce all greenhouse emissions by 80%. Yes, we mustn't be complacent. Yes, it's right that people should protest, but, you know, sort of gluing yourself onto people's homes or
like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, which is unfair. I think it's wrong, actually. And you know, I would be the first to speak up against that. And actually disrupting people's livelihoods. I had a cab driver this morning saying to me, this is just unfair. There are people who need to get to work whilst, you know, some of these people involved are sort of, you know, jetting off to LA or somewhere else on business class, yet they think it's a good idea to stop people, you know, earning their livelihood. That's not a good place to be in my book.
Rupert?
Well, firstly, let me take up the thing about jetting off to LA. We've just had Easter weekend. Let's take a good cue from a very famous person in history and let them, without sin, cast the first stone. Extinction Rebellion is not about blaming individuals for what they do. It's about us all working together to turn this around. And that's why we want to meet with the government and Sadiq Khan to discuss with them. And that's why we want to have citizens' assemblies to sort out how we get to the future, the carbon-free future that we desperately need to get to. Let me also take up the Minister's point about the alleged reduction of 42% in emissions since 1990. It's just lying with numbers.
Is it alleged? Because there is a clear... If you look at the graphs, there has been a decline in carbon emissions over the last 10 years.
If I could explain, if you include sea travel, if you include air travel, if you include embodied emissions, that means the emissions in the products that we buy from abroad, our emissions have barely fallen since 1990. So can we please nail this myth once and for all that Britain is a leader on this, on climate? We're just not, in terms of the facts.
Nadhim?
Respectfully, I obviously disagree with you. I think we have been... per capita,
what about what I just
we've
said?
led the G7. Right?
Air travel going up, sea travel emissions going up.
But my point being is you can protest, you can ask us to do more, you can push us harder. Nothing wrong with that. David Attenborough's doing it in the right way. Actually disrupting people's travel, causing the chaos outside this building here is wrong, in my view, because people need to get to work, they want to earn a living, they want to be able to make sure they get to pick up their children from school or whatever they need to do. And that just frustrates people. And actually, you know, there are other countries that also need to do more, but I don't see Extinction Rebellion actually organising in China or elsewhere.
Well, you're quite mistaken.
Extinction
Rebellion is a worldwide movement. We're an international movement. Well, Minister, I put it to you that you know full well that I wouldn't be on this programme if it weren't for these protests. And I also put it to you that William Hague wouldn't have put a major column in the Telegraph today saying the Conservatives have to wake up on climate if we hadn't been doing these protests.
Is the disruption justified?
Absolutely, because the disruption we're going to get, I mean, disruption isn't even the word. The disruption we're going to get if we allow climate chaos to let rip is a million times greater than this. We are facing the potential collapse of our very civilization.
We may be able to show the pictures of protesters on their way to Parliament Square going past Buckingham Palace. Will you be joining them, Jenny?
Will I be joining them? I mean, it's all right for me, living in Darlington, to look at what's been happening in London and the disruption and to admire it and to also find some of it really quite fun. Some of it looks like it's been quite good-natured. The police seem to have handled it brilliantly. I haven't been disrupted, and neither have my constituents, so I do understand that there is frustration. But I think that this has been born out of a lack of belief in that the government's ever going to do anything on this agenda that's sufficient, and it's come from that.
Right, so do you agree with Rupert on the carbon emissions? Have they been going down or have they been going up?
Well, we have clear commitments about getting them to zero by 2050.
And
Rupert would like them to be faster than that, I have no doubt. And we could have a discussion about what additional steps we could make to make that happen.
And we invite you to that discussion.
And I would
Will you come and meet with us?
gladly come to that discussion.
That's wonderful.
OK, well, you two are going to meet. You two are going to meet and collaborate. But Rupert, explain to our viewers and to Nadhim and Jenny what needs to be done to hit your target of zero carbon emissions by 2025 rather than 2050. What specific things would have to change in our lives?
An awful lot of things. For starters, of course, we wouldn't frack, we wouldn't build a new runway at Heathrow, we wouldn't build HS2.
All right, but those are things that are not happening. What would you change about our lives that exists currently?
We need a huge investment in renewables now. We need to start phasing out rapidly fossil fuel power stations. We need to start phasing out fossil fuel cars. But let me also say this.
But those things are happening, aren't they, Rupert? So you're talking about
not nearly fast enough.
Fine.
Not nearly fast enough.
Would that be radical enough to bring zero carbon emissions by 2025?
Probably not. So that's why what we're calling for is a citizens' assembly. We want the people with expert aid to be brought in on this, because it's patent that our representative democracy has failed on this issue. Everyone knows that our democracy is broken, and there's no way that it alone can rise to the challenge of this. So we're saying bring the people in, advised by the best experts, so that we can decide together how to get to carbon zero by 2025.
All right, I'm going to ask the people, that's Sam and Olivia, the people, what they think about the ideas of citizens' assemblies. But you say you want to bring everybody together, that we're all in this together, to quote another politician. But you will end up, to some extent, clobbering people on lower incomes who do rely on their cars, which may be older diesel cars, nurses on late shifts, Amazon delivery drivers, in order to achieve your aim. You accept that?
Firstly, let's remember that about a third of the population has no access to a car, and those are mostly poor people. In terms of the poor who are reliant on their cars, obviously what would need to be happening would be some kind of redistribution to make it possible for them to go along with the changes in policy that would be needed. But the crucial thing is, what we need to do is to put in the other things that would make it possible for people to give up their cars. So, better public transport, better cycling. Let's go far faster on this. Look to the continent for advice on how to do it.
Is it achievable?
Well, from what I've read, and I don't pretend to be a climate change expert, but 2025, from what I've read, that would involve sort of almost eradicating air travel, completely ending the production of meat. I mean, that would massively disrupt the whole of the UK economy and would surely lead to huge, massive inflation.
In terms of massive reduction in meat, actually, that could be enormously beneficial to the UK economy. For starters, also, it could make it far easier for us to feed ourselves. It's absolutely outrageous that at this point in history, we in Britain can nowhere near feed ourselves. And if we're lower on the food chain, that would be possible. This may be really crucial in years to come, as we're going to face crop failures with climate chaos.
But we saw what happened in France when Emmanuel Macron tried to introduce green taxes too quickly. The people revolted against him, and now he's had to take a step back. Don't you think you're just moving a little too fast, and that concern for the environment, which is of course incredibly valid, and I admire you all, but it does need to be balanced against people's livelihoods and people's lives, and as Nadhim said, the disruption on the streets, normal people just wanting to get to work. Don't you think you're going to completely alienate them and then take a huge step back, like what's
Macron's mistake was to target the poor with his carbon taxes. We think it's much more likely that a citizens' assembly would decide primarily to target the rich and businesses. In terms of disruption, let me also add that actually many Londoners and many tourists have hugely enjoyed this last week. For example, I've spent time on Waterloo Bridge. It was absolutely beautiful, with all our plants all over it. Tourists were loving it. Commuters were loving it. Cycling through, walking through. And here's the crucial point. Did you all know air pollution has gone down in London since our protests begun? That's fact.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
By how much?
I'm not sure by how much exactly, 10 to 20%, I believe. The experts have looked at it.
But
it's gone down.
It was the Easter holidays, Rupert, and not many people would have been travelling into work in the same numbers as they would be this week.
What I'm doing is I'm countering the lie that's been put out by the right-wing press that this has led to more idling traffic and air pollution going up. Simply not true.
Sam, will the politicians take this on?
So the whole question about this debate is about the amount of disruption that people can tolerate in their daily lives. And in micro, that's being played out over the last few days, with some people taking a view that we shouldn't have the disruption that we've seen. But more generally, the question is, can we make the necessary choices that will involve disruption in people's lives in order to get the change that campaigners and others say is necessary? And if you take a step back and look at British politics at the moment, it seems that in some fields, particularly like Brexit, particularly those perhaps pushing for a no-deal Brexit, they are prepared to countenance quite a high degree of disruption for certain political ends. But the question is whether or not there's a group in British politics that have taken the amount of and own the amount of disruption that would be needed for the necessary green changes that you need to do in order to hit some of the more ambitious targets. At the moment, it looks to me like neither the Labour Party nor the Conservative Party have particularly jumped on this as an issue, have been focusing in on it, and are prepared to push things that look like they may disrupt the people whose votes they are going to seek in the near future in the way that they have done for other policies.
Is that true, Jenny?
I don't know if that's entirely fair, because I think you have seen a growth in interest in environmental issues, despite the fact that we've all been totally preoccupied with Brexit for the last 3 years. But I mean, even if you're right, I think that's changing.
What's the signature Labour policy in a party that is fundamentally a bit split between environmentalists and trade unionists, who sometimes can pull in slightly different directions in that party when it comes to what to do on the environment?
We've banned fracking. I mean, just as an example, you know, that's something that wasn't uncontroversial within the Labour movement for the reasons that you've alluded to, but that was a decision that was taken because we thought it was justified. But I do think, I mean, even if I did accept what you've said, I think that has now changed, and you're seeing, you know, particularly younger people, but not just younger people, standing up and saying, actually, we want a party to be part of that champions these issues, and environmental fairness and justice, and making sure that we have this at the core of everything we do, not as a sort of separate policy area. I think that's something that the Labour Party wants to take on.
Would you be prepared to tell your constituents they couldn't go on holiday?
Well, I don't think that's what anyone's arguing. Well, telling my constituents.
If you wanted to, but that is what you're saying. If you really wanted, well, it is. You don't want people to travel by plane, do you?
We want a massive reduction in air travel. That's going to be essential. If air travel carries on going up, we are without a paddle. But that doesn't mean you don't take holidays. It's perfectly possible. I've done it myself last year, for example, to take wonderful holidays in Europe and even beyond by train.
Right.
And this country too. Why not have more holidays?
What I think go that far. No, what I think needs to happen is this conversation where we have a commitment for 2050. You want it to be a lot quicker. There is a reality test as well about whether or not you can come up with ideas that would have the desired impact on, you know, limiting climate change, but also would be acceptable and tolerable to my constituents who do understand climate change. They're not relaxed about it. They want to do their bit, but there's a conversation that's somehow not been able to be had so far where we land on those things that are deliverable, supportable by the public, and we can actually get on and make those changes that we need to do.
To some extent, Jenny's right. So far, the public have taken these things on board. But to go further, to reach the sort of targets that Rupert is talking about, even if it isn't 2025, you would have to do some radical things to people's lives. Are you prepared to do that?
Well, I think Sam set both major parties an interesting challenge. So, to say, are you really committed to this agenda? You know, when you get Jeremy Corbyn saying he wants to reopen coal mines, it's very difficult then people take their party seriously.
Can I just correct? No, it was his pitch during the first leadership. Yes. He said there may be a situation in there where that happened. He is not advocating. He said the opening of coal mines, but that's a bit flippant.
No. Hold on a second. There's a very important point to Sam's point, is because he's challenging both of us, and part of the issue that we have is Brexit dominates so much of the headlines that when you talk about the Energy Act, when you talk about making sure that we get all greenhouse gas down by 80% by 2050, when we talk about our £52 billion investment in renewables, right, it doesn't cut through because the nation thinks that all we're doing is talking about Brexit and indulging ourselves.
Minister, let me cut through.
He's asking what it is that we're going to do that's different.
I hear you.
Will you meet with us? Will you meet with us this week?
I'd happily meet with you.
Wonderful. It's arranged.
Right, because
you and us.
Why? But why? Okay, you've arranged that. Well done, Rupert. But Greta Thunberg, the young activist from Sweden, Theresa May's not meeting her. The other party leaders, I believe, are. Why not?
Well, you can imagine the Prime Minister's diary is pretty busy at the moment.
But if you wanted to have a PR coup, wouldn't you?
But you also look at what we've done. I've just been talking about the £52 billion investment in renewables, the Energy Act. All these things, I think, give us a global leadership role in this. Look at the work that Amber Rudd did in Paris on the climate change agreement to make sure that actually we led the way there. But it's not cutting through because Brexit dominates everything.
And Brexit on one side, what about the big guzzlers, if you like, or the big countries that emit into the environment far more than we do, like America, for example?
Absolutely, but voters in this country don't vote for politicians in other countries. The question remains pertinent for the main political parties. Where, for instance, is a Treasury-funded scrappage scheme? If you believe that reducing the amount of emissions from diesel cars, particularly, is an urgent priority. It's been talked about, it's never been delivered. I think that there are a number of measures that you have held back from doing, partly because of cost grounds, partly because of fear of disruption, and partly because of a sort of political timidity due to the fact that other things are dominated. And if you're going to have a little bit of, ability to disrupt people's lives, this isn't the area that you're choosing to prioritise. I think there's a political choice to make this not your focus, other than a few plastic bottles and trying to replace those. And that's more symbolism than I think that the fundamental change.
Infrastructure. Come on, I mean, Sam, this
government was taken to court not that long ago over air quality and levels of air pollution in London, weren't they?
And look, people actually, quite rightly, are constantly pushing us further.
William Hague is calling for a whole step change in Conservative seriousness on this, and that's what we want to see. We want to see all parties put this massively up the agenda, and that's what seems to be possible now with us, with Greta, with David Attenborough. Things are coming together. Let's really make it happen. We mean it. We want to talk with everyone. We want to make this happen all together. We're not about casting stones.
All I ask is, don't disrupt people's lives when they're trying to get to work.
But we wouldn't have got to this point if we hadn't have done so, and you know that, and everyone.
And
now that you're here, you can stop the disruption.
Where do you go from?
To a full-scale negotiation with us and a citizens' assembly, we will potentially end this rebellion.
Nadhim.
Well, I think you're making a terrible error, and you'll lose.
I've just given you an offer.
By disrupting people's lives.
Are you going to take this disruption further? Because we've got this tweet here from the royal household. The visit will take place, talking, of course, about President Trump, from Monday the 3rd of June to Wednesday the 5th of June this year. President Trump and Mrs Trump previously joined the Queen for tea at Windsor Castle in July 2018. Find out more about state visits. This is the full works for President Trump. What will you be doing?
Well, I think you can take for granted we'll be protesting against that. But in a certain sense, in this country, President Trump is the least of our problems. We need to tackle the soft climate denial that has permeated our whole society until very recently. I mean, the lack of serious attention to this as an issue which is the defining issue of our times. This is the issue on which our children will judge us. And if we don't get it right, we will be judged. So, yes, you can bet your bottom dollar that unless the government negotiates with us in earnest, unless we see serious progress towards a citizens' assembly to sort all this out, we will carry on.
Rupert, thank you very much.